Janie hört uns nicht.
Do you hear us? We
Do you?
start. We are online?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Hello, welcome back
But
after
we
the
don't.
break.
We,
And we are still discussing if Janie is hearing us, but I suppose we have a small monitor here where we can see, and she, okay. And yeah, I just wanted to two phrases of introduction that the idea of this so-called masterclass was to confront different artists. No? It is a kind of subvention for Corona, which is financing this event. And then we said, okay, this was meant for German artists, but it's a little bit boring only to have German artists here. So we have to find a way that some people from other countries can participate. And so we developed this idea that, for example, this is from LA, Janie is in LA, and we have other from Britain and so on in other master classes. So, the idea is to know more about their work. How do they work? How do they decide how do they work with the materials? How do they find the materials? And to confront two positions which have, of course, some similarities, and we will talk about the similarities maybe today in the evening or even tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah. So we have the pleasure to have Janie Geiser with us, who was in Dresden in person 2016 at the conference Photo Animation, The Irresistible Charm of Movement, a title inspired by Buñuel. At the conference. We plan to publish the text from the conference, also from the master classes. Janie is interesting for us because she works in a very hybrid form, and for us that's a characteristic of photo film, because a photo can take on different kind of representation forms. It can be part of an installation, can be part of a film, can be part of an exhibition, can be part of a book. Each format is a different kind of bringing them into order, working with the material. And this is what Janie does. Her artistic practice includes visual art, film, installation, and performance. Here I quote from her biography, one of the pioneers of Renaissance of American avant-garde puppet theater. And I also ask her to show some of this work and how it's related with still images during the masterclass. Janie creates innovative and hypnotic performances. Also the way of performance or the act of performance is something which both artistic position we invited to the masterclass brings together. She integrates in her performance objects, puppets, and projection. Janie teaches at Carl Art School of Theater in LA. And Janie, you are teaching in the puppet theater department, right?
Well, there's no puppet theater department.
How is the department called?
It's in the theater school, but I teach things like shadow theater and different kinds of puppet and also the intersection of puppetry and projection.
Okay, and Janie is also the founding co-director of Automata, an artistic run performance gallery. Her material for animation films are images and objects, and I like this term you use, abundant images. It's different, and maybe we can discuss this, the difference between abundant images and found footage. They are somehow opposites, abundant and found, and also abundant or found objects. And you investigate them forensically, layer by layer. Today and tomorrow, this I'm very happy about, because 2016 you showed Arbor, and you're working crazily. Like every year there are 1 or 2 films coming out. So we have the chance now in the next 2 days to really see your recent works from the last 2017 to 2020. So, genau, the stage is yours.
Okay. Well, thank you again.
Okay, so if you want to continue with your presentation, please.
Okay, so we need to see the slideshow. There we go. Okay. And in the photos, the women are clearly a big part of everything, but in that ritual photo, the men are toward the front. So when I knew I wanted to make a film, and I started really trying to do that right away once I found the photo. And I started by just panning into sections or scanning across the whole image, looking for details. But when I looked at the footage, and this is all animated frame by frame, and I love Gustav's definition of breathing life, putting breath into the photographs. But they're also, they kind of emit some kind of breath as well. But these sections of the photograph just didn't give me the same feeling that I was getting from the whole experience of looking at them. And I realized that they needed to be revealed rather than just shown. So I started coming up with ideas about how to do that. And I cut a slit in a piece of black paper and started looking at the photographs through that, and then just got another piece of black paper and used it to kind of cover the slit and animate it all along so that each little section of the photograph can be slowly revealed. And then finding also ways to use those slits. Sometimes I would just have the slit there and move the photograph itself under the slit. So there's a kind of activation of the image that I'm after, not only revealing what's there, but what is kind of latent in the story of these images. And kind of what was latent for me was this sense of theatricality, of spectacle, of this need that we have as humans to kind of be part of something other, something bigger than daily life. And if you think about the Masons, which I know very little about, it's not a particular religion. It incorporates symbology from ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and Christian religion and the worker masons, and then just kind of mixes all those together. In the U.S., there's always images of George Washington and different masons in the symbology. But more what I was after was why we as humans, or I can't answer it, but this need for ritual and theater. And it's very related then to what I do also in terms of performance being an important part of my practice. So I started doing these, filming through the slits. Then I started adding other elements. I used postcards as well because I wanted to have some way to place these images inside an environment. So there's a couple of images of this old hotel and the moon and different kinds of trees and plants. So I scanned the images and made blow-ups of things. I photoshopped things, and then I printed a lot of things on acetate so that I could film and be superimposing at the same time on a light table, so I could double or triple the images. So that's when you see these things like just moving up and down and doubling each other. That's a very analog process of just filming them directly and my hand manipulating them in those ways. So there's a kind of performance that I'm doing in the act of shooting. So there were flower arrangements on the table. So I decided to find some more flower arrangements and Photoshop them into these isolated images and use those to float through the space as well to give this kind of sense of color and the heightened sense of ritual of things kind of coming from nowhere. And then eventually I started adding in real flowers too, because in LA there's flowers all the time. So I just go outside and pick a few. And I love the sense of the scale of the real flowers against the scale of the photographs, and also the kind of dimensionality that they added to the film. I forget who coined this term, but it was in relation to Bruce Conner's films that sometimes films use something they called a surface declaring device, something that sort of pulls off of the flat surface of the film and both creates more depth and flattens the rest of the image. So I'm always interested in sort of that, the depth versus the flatness, and the materiality of something versus the kind of digital quality. So then the title of the film, I had been reading this article about comets that showed images of comets from the medieval times. And one of the terms for comets was flowers of the sky. So then that just clicked with me for the title of the film. And then just thinking about other kinds of ritual practices, like numbers are often part of a kind of spiritual practice, doubling, and mirrors. So those all became tools for me to use in the making of the film. So numbers come in and just sort of float over the people and give you this sense of the purpose, or me at least, and then people are doubled. So the whole film for me was going toward this moment toward the end where basically everybody starts to double and float up, and they're having a kind of rapturous experience at this installation of this one man. Some more flowers. So the other thing about just working with found images is the imperfections in the image. So I love things like the crease in the faces of people from just the history, the image carrying its own history of time with it. So this is the image that really focused the second part of the film, which is the man standing there waiting for something to happen. Everybody's gathered around him. Everyone's looking at him. There are these men in front with these sort of sword things and a table with fringes on it that I have no idea what it's for. But when I look at the image, I also thought, oh, it kind of reminds me of like a mosh pit where somebody would just jump in and get carried away by other people. So I decided to sort of combine those ideas, and I made a version of the guy just on acetate and let him drop through the frame. So everyone's looking at him. I love the women's shiny hats. They form this kind of amazing pattern. And so I prepared for the moment by bringing the numbers back in around him and the flowers. And even had, through the animation, had these sword people sort of batting at the flowers. So before he jumps, he triples and duplicates, and it's kind of like a splitting of his material body in order to reach this height of whatever this installation is. So then here he was just on this little piece of acetate, and he jumps through the frame. And when he does that, these white flowers just start to come up. It's almost as if him touching the ground causes everything to explode in the room. You see the full moon outside, and then there's kind of a change in how some of the images are depicted, and the doubling is not just with oneself, but with other people. And everything just starts to rise in some kind of mysterious rapture. And then we come to the end of the film, it's all flowers. And the music I approach as also a kind of collage practice. And I had found an album in a thrift store that was music for your slideshow. And it had titles such as Mysterious or Circus or, Cloudy Sky. So I mostly used Mysterious for this film, combining it with other things. So now I'll just talk a little bit quickly about how I work on these films. Up until now, for the last 13 years, I've been working in an air float trailer, which is kind of like an Airstream parked in my backyard. But I'm actually in the middle of moving, selling my trailer and fixing up a garage to be my new studio, which will have advantages because I can actually turn around in the space. There's a coziness to the warm interior of this trailer. And I just collect objects, I collect images, much like Timo and Katarina, just they are for use. And they might be around me while I'm working, but they ultimately, their purpose is to be used. And books for reading, books for cutting up, just all kinds of different objects that eventually usually make it into something. Drawers full of things. And I just have a very simple setup with a laptop computer connected to a frame-by-frame animation program. And my desk is just full of the items that I'm working with at that given time so that I can just reach over and grab things. So for 22 Light Years, the film that you're going to see soon, there were two main sources. And one was a group of negatives that I found, all kinds of different negatives of people, probably from the 30s and 40s, but it was one box, one collection. So there's a kind of similarity among the images. There clearly are just a couple of photographers taking these images. And I love what happens when you overlay them. So I worked on a light table, both to shoot and to sort the images. And sometimes just how I would place them on the light table would tell me, oh, that would work really well together. But then I had been having this obsession with a kind of home design software that I've been seeing, where you can just get the software on your laptop and you can design floor plans for your house. You can sort of build a house. You can move it kind of like you move in a video game. So I love that strange kind of world, physical, digital world of that. And I started just teaching myself this program. And as I was teaching myself, I screen recorded it. So I would just screen record myself, like the mouse would be moving a building around or building something or moving a tree in. And I never really learned the program very well, but I had the screen recording of these sort of rehearsals became the source to put these people into. So they move into this very, video game feeling world. I kept all of the like arrows and different things that you can see when you're actually manipulating something like that. And I turned most of it into negative and changed the color and did a lot of manipulation with those images as well. So for instance, and then I could just focus on little sections of them, like a section of wall just changing its wallpaper pattern. And then bringing the figures into, let's see here, yeah. So really the film came together in the editing, because I would shoot the negatives and some other materials that I gathered, just kind of geometric shapes. You'll see when you see the film, because I just wanted to activate it more. Different kinds of patterns came in. And then I would composite it with these screen recordings and bring the people into these environments, such as here, like there's a floor plan being drawn and this girl comes in through a slit that opens up. So working a lot the way that I had worked also in Flowers of the Sky, with black paper mats that can be animated just like the images can be animated. Sometimes I use digital mats that I'm just making in Premiere, but mostly most of the mats are physical mats, which allows for a different kind of compositing. Then the third element actually was I did use some found footage. I found this film on, I think it was the Library of Congress, where it's how to be a public speaker, and it has a lot of scenes about how to stand. And I just love these men's legs, that they would just kind of sway and move. And so placing this large, gigantic figure inside these houses and kind of wondering what that means. So I think there's some things about power that are floating through here besides all of the other ideas. And then, like I said, patterns, and something like this image, I just have an old tray that I found that has cutout holes, and would move that in front of the camera, between the camera and the image, to get these different kinds of patterns going on. And the plants in the Space Designer program were also really exciting for me, and the way that I could move them around in the frame. Really, there was a kind of random sense of how they came together. I would look at both sets of footage and then figure out how to activate each one, until toward the end, then sometimes I would shoot something more deliberately to be in a specific environment. And using just kind of the tools that are in a program like Premiere that allow you to bring a part of the image forward and backwards. Another thing that happens in the film is just using illustrations of bugs, which are also out of scale, kind of like the flowers were in the first film. And they're sort of overrunning the environment. So there's always this sort of sense of the danger of the outside to this insular world of these people and their spaces. So now we'll watch 22 Light Years, and then we'll come back and have a Q&A and talk. So thank you, and I guess we'll do the screening now.
So,
Fantastic.
Thank you, Katja.
Really fantastic. It's nice to see it on the big screen here in the cinema.
yeah, so we have 20 minutes to discuss a little bit. Tomorrow we have a little bit more time. But yeah, maybe we begin with the first film, The Flowers. Yeah, the flowers in of the sky.
Microphone.
Ah, okay. Flowers of the Sky. And in this film particularly, it was it came to me that you are looking at photos like places of crime. Something has happened there. What is it like? And then you reveal, as you told us, and this crime imaginary is also supported also by the music, of course, because we have this kind of vertigo, delire music, like in the Hitchcock film Vertigo, and then, but then you don't show us the whole thing. Never. No? We just get some glimpses. We get some fragments. We get some stripes of it, and so
Yeah, this is exactly the thing that I was also thinking, that she is sort of giving us a kind of secret, kind of something that we, a case that we should solve. And I thought that, okay, so this is one thing for Janie. Janie has a certain reason to do it, but everybody else would read a completely different story. So I haven't seen any kind of crime, for example, in this movie, because I just gathered that it was about a Freemason, the Freemasons' ritual, and it's not loud enough.
Yeah.
Sorry. So and therefore I was immediately. I went immediately into that subject. That in America I remember that the Freemason played a huge role, and even in the $1 bill you have this symbol, which is the Freemason symbol. So maybe there is a crime behind somewhere, but not on the picture, I guess.
But I didn't know that it was the Freemasons. I think Jamie told us.
She
now.
told it.
Yeah, but it is not in the film. I'm referring to the film. If I see the film, I see masses which have big audiences, large audiences, which come together. And
Swords.
An opera singer in a loop or something. Yeah? And I don't know, did they come for this opera screening, or is it just something mysteriously, a mysterious meeting? Of course, we see the masses of the people. So that's maybe you can comment on the crime subject.
I mean, in this particular film, I have a forensic approach, but I wouldn't say there is a crime that I'm after discovering. More I'm after is sort of, why are they there? And not in just a documentary way, but in a fictitious way too. That they suggest something happening and I'm imagining other things growing out of that. But I was in a Masonic lodge one time because I was doing a performance there, and the Masons didn't guard their closets or their attic. And so we looked through them. Maybe this is where the crime is, Thomas. But there were all these robes and headdresses and, different kinds of swords and staffs. And I really understood it as theater, as the need that theater, like that, the need we all have for some theatrical, some kind of bigger than life. And sometimes, okay, I grew up Catholic. There's that in the Catholic Church. I'm not Catholic anymore, but I appreciate those rituals. And so I could sort of see that with the Masons, it's not just yes, it's a secret society. Yes, they exclude a lot of people. And I can't say I admire or don't admire them. That's not the point with me. It's more that they are figuring out some kind of meaning in life through having these very special group rituals with intention and shared knowledge about what is going on. And it, I think, probably, in my conjecture, like adds to the meaning of life to have these moments where something big is happening, even if it's all kind of made up out of centuries of fiction. So I have my own fiction I'm applying, which is that the ritual works and the flowers appear and they all just float up to wherever they're going to float up to. But they have their own fiction. I'm sure that a Mason would not describe it that way, so I'm not going to put that on it. But they have, it's something about our human need that I was really interested in. And then also, as with the photo of the schoolboys that we saw in Timo and Katarina's piece, there is this need for order that is imposed through the structure of bodies. So in those school photos, yes, they are putting everybody in order as a kind of hope that you'll stay in order. And there's something about the order in these photos that also seems kind of similar to me. It's not positive or negative. It's about, oh my God, life is chaos. If we organize ourselves into these X's and groups and look at one place, then something must have meaning. There must be some order to life because we can create it in these events. I don't know. This is all just the way my brain works, but I don't expect everyone to have the same interpretation, just like you wouldn't if you're looking at a painting. But kind of giving just like a template, a sense of images and movement that maybe will just stimulate you in some way.
Yeah, of course, that's important. We have our own. I can go on with my interpretation because I didn't know that there were Freemasons. I saw the film 2 times maybe before, and so I was thinking what it is about. Then I see the trembling of the images which you animate. So I think it's something about perception, about the trembling of our perception. It is very difficult to see correctly what it is about. We see strange signs, flowers and numbers, and sometimes the numbers are upside down, so it could be a code or something, I don't know. The flowers in color, that is also very important because the whole imaginary is black, more or less black and white, and then we have this color explosion with the flowers. So for me it was something which had to do with perception, how we look at the world and how we put together the worlds, the strange signs of the world, and we do our own interpretation.
Yeah, something like that.
I love that
thinking. Yeah, so that there is a mystery in both of the films. Actually, I mean, as far as I remember, all of in your films is a mystery that I have the impression that I have to solve somehow the mystery, and then after a while, I just gathered that I probably cannot solve the mystery per se because it's yours, but I can find out something like in a Rorschach picture. So I can find out some reason for all that mystery that you just provide us.
I mean, I think part of what I'm getting at for my own self in my work is not the answers, but just like digging at that mystery and knowing that I'll never have an answer. And so I think that's why the films don't usually provide an answer, because it's more about getting to the bottom of things, but never reaching the bottom, and the pleasure of the digging.
I really would love to have an answer for that Freemason thing. That what is exactly happening with this guy in front of the whole line of people with swords and funny costumes and stuff. Yes, I promise I will get into it and I will find out.
Okay, good. And it does say his installation.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. It says his installation.
Because the sound is
sound.
also important. We have this sound of played backwards or in reverse, and we have then this the beating of the heart. That is, for my interpretation, it was very important, the beating of the heart, because it's kind of the body. It's a kind of biological truth. You can't go behind this biological truth.
And did you see that in that moment the clock is go backwards too? When the sound reversed, and
Yeah.
the clock goes the other way. Did
Yeah.
you see this?
And and that fits well with my interpretation that our senses are treacherous. Our senses are chimerical, are elusive. No, we see things, we don't know exactly what it is, and we have to put together to resolve the riddle. And for me, I see you have flowers in nearly all your films, and it's an important biological part. No? And sometimes maybe also a counterweight to technical images, like in the second film, no? Technical drawings or something. But I don't know. But there is, if we hear the heartbeat, no? It's something very important. We all remember La Jetée because Gustav told us about the film at the beginning of the session. There's also this heartbeat of the
that's right.
prisoners, and so it's we don't know what it is exactly, but we can sense that it has something. It is something important, something biological is going on, and so that's how I put together these fragments and sounds. Elements.
So what is the solution? What did you understand?
We can't trust our senses.
Yes, we can.
But actually, you also work a lot with masking, so we don't see the edges of this panorama, and we are somehow floating inside the image. I had this sense of exclusivity of this group, because this afternoon we showed this program flyer, and it's a lot about racism and discrimination and representation in pictures. So for me, this feeling was like I don't belong in this group, So, and would I love to belong to this group? And I don't know, because it's somehow I have to follow their rules, and I have to be part of this ceremony, even if I don't want to. And then, of course, you show us.
You have to apply for it. If you really want. No, well, the only way to get to the Freemasons, to contact someone who is in. Okay. I know some people actually. So and then how do you call them? They have different bajo. I don't know. Yeah.
Initiates or something.
And then the initiation, you have to apply for it. And if actually, I don't think so that they would initiate you, but they would initiate me, and then you can get in.
What also Janie said, but they are all white. I don't see any. Right. I don't know. I don't see represented the American society in this. Picture.
There are black Freemasons too.
Yeah, but in this picture.
Now there
working
are.
In.
Yes. This picture is. I am very aware of their exclusivity in these images. They are all white. They all, they even look like they're from sort of the same community. But now this Masonic lodge that I went to had several Latino members and one black member that I met. So that means there's probably more. And I asked one of them, what the attraction of it was. And he talked about how it was a men-only one. People help each other with jobs. People, there's a kind of practical thing where probably it helps you get into a little bit better situation if you follow those rules, Katya, and kind of admit yourself to their structures. But I'm so, because I grew up Catholic. Because I grew up Catholic, I'm so not about any group. I don't want to belong to any group, except some just group of friends. But because I find most groups are about exclusion. Maybe that's a big statement to make, but look at the Catholic Church and women.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about the sound, the layers of sound which you are producing. We have this backward sound and this plate in reverse. We have. I heard in the second film. I heard alarming noises, cries of people, and sirens of police cars, and that's why I think of catastrophe and all this.
The second film, in the second film, there
In the
was
second
definitely
film.
some catastrophic things.
And I thought, maybe we start with it.
Well, I was just going to say, in the second film, 22 Light Years, I started in 2019, and then I made it through the pandemic. And so the pandemic definitely informed it. Like, all these people are just alone in their houses, and the houses are swirling around them. And the sounds, I was recording a lot of the sounds around me during the year. So the sirens were sirens in my neighborhood. Every time you would hear a siren, as I'm sure was true for you, you thinking about someone is ill and going to the hospital. So there was definitely this sense of disaster swirling through that film. It very much informed it. But as I said earlier, I do collect sounds, like I collect objects. So I find sound and record it, as I know you do too. And it's a common practice in experimental film. And then find old records. And then just as I'm working on the editing, I start to bring those sounds in and again, see how they activate the image and what they add to it rather than how they illustrate it.
So actually,
the choir is actually
how because you said now in the editing comes the sound, but how, because there's so much layers in the pictures, so how does the layers coming, because is it like pieces you shooting and then in the editing they build up a certain kind of order, and of course in the second film you have this 3D imaginary. You explained that you were shooting the negatives on the slide table, and then there are so many different movements in the second film, and I like also this the for example the movement you create in the 3D model, because it's so different. It's so different from the movements you create on the animation table, So how is this process of layering in your work?
Well, in 22 Light Years in particular, I was really interested in that clash between those two forms, the designer software and the negatives, which are physical objects. And even though they're filmed digitally, they maintain some of that physicality. But the other footage doesn't exist as footage or as objects. It just exists in the digital world. So that clash of those two things, I had a feeling about it. And then when I started putting them together, I felt like, okay, this is what I was feeling. Now, I don't know if anybody else has that, but it's not even describable. It's just kind of a clash of worlds, a clash of ways of seeing, a clash of movement that feels kind of like life today to me, even though the images are much older than today, the negatives. So yeah, and I do start listening and bringing in the sound early in the process, just as soon as I start throwing things into a timeline. And then in that film, everything had to come together in the editing. But in Flowers of the Sky, a lot of it is kind of just how it's shot. It's shot through these physical masks. So there's not as much. The flowers come in as a layering, but just because that was the only way to put them together. But that one has a more kind of analog approach to the shooting and the editing.
Are there any questions from the public? You can get the mic, of course. If not, I go on with my interpretations.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering if it's. I thought, does it talk about the second film? No, the 22 Light Years. There's a danger, of course. No, it is not the danger of a new brave world. It's more or less, for me, it was a danger of a new, well-behaved, proper world. because you are using this consumer software,
Right.
Which is in a way a subversive use of a commercial, rather boring imaginary, but you pull it into your imaginary, combining it with negatives, with these black
Bugs,
world.
yeah.
Yeah, it's in the blackness and the negative, and it has no boundary, and everything can evolve in any direction. I have this kind of feeling, and so that's how do you? But because in your talk you were very satisfied with this consumerware, because you could experiment. Maybe you can talk about how you feel about this software.
Well, if I were a consumer, I would not be satisfied, because in trying to make, first of all, it was actually pretty hard to make what I wanted. I never could make what I wanted. So I had to just film myself trying. And I felt like if I was really going to design a house in this, it would be their house, not my house. So it was imposing certain like built-in limits, like a lot of digital forms do. Just like people talk about, I mean, it's getting better, but in video games, oh, you have endless possibilities. But they're all possibilities that are built into the game. And it's even more limited in this kind of inexpensive consumer software that maybe gives you the illusion that you can design a house, but you really can't. I could never figure out how to get a roof on a house and make it look right. So there's no roofs. So yeah, Thomas, yeah, I think the limits of what it could do were part of what became interesting to me, that I couldn't be satisfied with it as a consumer. So I could only be sort of satisfied with it, with how it kind of could be a place for these people who were very unsettled, and to express that unsettling quality.
Yeah, and also,
But just wait, maybe this is also interesting in this aspect of found footage or limits, because if you find
Right.
something, also this program is somehow a found footage, because you play
Right.
with what is inside this magic box, and you
Right.
work with the limits, because I was thinking, like, if she used this 3D model, and then also, for example, in animation. I already asked you once, if you do an animation, you are limited with the animation table, for example. There's also not endless space in animation.
Right.
And we can see this in
Right.
your films, that the movements, for example, in Flowers of the Sky, they always have a certain length, they have a certain timing, and then you're at the edge, So I would compare this computer program with found footage, and also with the limits, for example, you have in certain medias and certain ways of working.
Yeah, I think that's pretty true.
but in the consumer software, you feel quite well this model world. It's a model world. It's also, as we talked with Timo and Katharina, this representative image. It's like how a house could be, and how we put wallpaper on the walls and so on. And so that's what makes me cry when I see
But
these
what we
images.
artists do,
And
I remember when I met Gustav, we went into a computer hall, it was a motorbike.
Arcade.
The arcade. And what Gustav did, he tried to turn the motorbike around and drive in the other direction. And of course it didn't work. And this is like, for me, this is like artistic research. If you take such a program and you check out the limits, of the program. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think limits are kind of exciting too, because that's what we experience every day. But yeah, the physicality of the animation, that's interesting, Katya. It's also like, how far can my arm reach in a shot? How large is the piece of paper? All of those things become limits that allow you to kind of shape something through those limits and come up against them.
But I think with the second film, with 22 Light Years, you extended it because you started to put like two
Right.
or three pictures and started to combine more movements and like more in a way like a split screen or like a multi-screen. So I think that in this more recent work and the 3D world, you played a lot with space and actually
Right.
extending this limits of the analog animation table and the time you have to travel on the animation table.
Right. Right. Yeah. So
Okay, I think
that was very different for me.
maybe these were some closing words.
Yeah.
Because we will see you tomorrow again, and then you
Yes.
start. And in the second part, we have Timo and Katharina again. So we have
So
more
that-
time tomorrow because we'll show 5 films,
Shorter
but
films.
shorter films. And yeah,
So that would be maybe an interesting closing remark. That is always very important to search in the limits.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. In that last inch, there's an infinity.
If you unfold it.
All right. Well, right. Well, thank you for the first part of the program and this part, and I look forward to coming back tomorrow.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for the beautiful explanation and the films too.
okay,
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
bye.
See ya.
So we end the live stream.